Hey guys, welcome back to another week of Cyber US History. A couple things here. First and foremost, finalizing grades for the second marking period. So if I'm missing something, you need to reach out and let me know via email if I missed an assignment. I am wrapping those grades up as we speak. So again, a couple of you reached out, continue to reach out. If I'm missing something, let me know. Secondly, course recommendations. I sent you an email discussing how I need you to communicate. If you don't want to be in the level that you're in now, or you don't want to be in cyber next year, you need to let me know. Otherwise, if I don't hear from you, you're going to be recommended for the level that you're in now in a cyber government class for next school year. Okay, so again, communicate if you need to be recommended otherwise, or if you're hoping to take a different course. Moving forward, since we're moving now into the third marking period, we are starting with the Great Depression. I'm going to share with you a few things. Basically, the reasons for it, I think, are more important than anything else. And when we look at this, there's a few aspects of this that we can compare to present day. So skipping over a few things here, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but President Hoover at the time, he's president in 1928 when things are going well. There were little signs of cracks in 1928 into 29, but ultimately it was the stock market crash, as I'm sure you're familiar, in October of 1929 that led to this economic downfall. So the problem with Hoover and why historians point to Hoover as a bad president is that this idea of doing too little too late. Hoover was an orphan, went to Stanford University on his own. So he sort of looks at life that way, and he expects Americans to do the same. So when he sees America in an economic hardship, his approach is that we're going to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and work through this. It's called rugged individualism is his approach. It simply didn't work. It was a time of need for government intervention. So he gets involved with this Reconstruction Finance Corporation, starts bailing out certain industries, but again, it wasn't enough and it was too little too late. Finally, the last straw for Hoover in the midst of the height of the Great Depression in 1932 to 35. In 32, we're in an election year. He's running for re-election, and the bonus army, the veterans from World War I are marching on Washington to try to get a bonus for their combat pay, time served. And it was promised to them during Harding's administration, but not until 1945 or death, whichever came first. So, of course, they want their compensation, and they march on Washington and camp at Washington to get Congress to pass a bonus bill. Hoover responds with this. He sends in the military, and led by General MacArthur, who we're going to study with World War II. And these scenes play out, and it looks as though our own troops are attacking our veteran troops. And ultimately, this is the last straw for Hoover. It's an easy victory for FDR. Okay, so jumping to the causes of the Great Depression, there's a lot. There's a lot to talk about here. And just to scratch the surface, these are the main causes here. So when we talk about overproduction being a key cause, remember in the 1920s, things were going well. So these companies were mass producing way too much product with the idea that the demand was constantly going to be there. So they had an overabundance of product. Of course, your price goes down. Okay, in particular with the farmers, that was a problem. The uneven distribution of income, the top percentages of the wealthiest classes were not spending. The trickle-down economics was not working. They were giving tax breaks to the wealthy. The wealthy weren't spending that money, so it was slowing the economy down. Installment plans we talked about in the 1920s. You looked at how people were buying things on credit, and that became normal. Well, when the market crashed, people don't have any money to pay all this debt off. So it was way too much debt. Plus the tariff wars. This is something that's going on with Trump right now, who's recently elected, has talked about placing tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China in particular. All that is a tax on incoming goods. So what that caused in the 1920s was other countries to raise their tariffs. So we had a tariff war, and nobody wins. The consumer actually gets hurt. Finally, the overexpansion of credit. Banks were loaning money to questionable businesses. without really doing full credit checks, so to speak. And oftentimes these businesses went under and weren't paying their loans back. So as a result, the banks were hurting. And then, of course, the weakness of the labor unions. So all of that, guys, is just kind of scratching the surface on the causes. Of course, the stock market crash is one of the bigger causes. It caused an economic tailspin. People were foreclosing on their homes. And again, we saw unemployment rates, the likes of which we've never seen before and will never see again. 1 out of every 4 Americans was unemployed. And if you were African American, 1 out of every 2. So again, very high unemployment rates. We saw things like bread lines, so on and so forth. Right. Also, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates low. I don't want to get into this, but essentially when things are good, the Fed needs to keep interest rates sort of start raising them. They're hand in hand because you don't want to free up money and make money cheap. So when business is booming, that's the time to start raising rates. They kept rates low, and that was a mistake by the Federal Reserve. Okay. Finally, the runs on banks. You need to know this term. When people back then, there was no FDIC. We're going to get to that with FDR's New Deal. But what that is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And what that means is the government insures your money. If your bank goes under, unless they're not insured by the FDIC, the government will reimburse you. The banks pay that insurance for a reason, so that this doesn't happen. In the 1930s, what happened when the sky started falling, everybody wanted their money. Banks make money by putting money on the street, meaning they invest your money. They don't have it all in-house. They invest it in the market, housing, like I said, real estate. They give loans to businesses. So they don't have all that money. So back then, if you were the last person to get to the bank, your money was gone and the bank was boarded up. So people were literally running to the bank to withdraw their money out of fear of what was going on with the economy. And so these banks went under. Today, we don't have that problem. So if the sky should fall, don't run to the bank. You don't need to worry about it. You'll get your money from the government. Okay. So again, banks were hit hard early on. You can see there about 3,000, 10% of banks were forced to close in the first 2 years. Okay. This week, you're looking at the causes of the Great Depression. You're going to watch a crash course from John Green and answer some questions on that. And that's going to get us started with the Great Depression. It's going to be a unit we'll be studying here for a few weeks. Okay. If you guys have any questions, as always, like I said, reach out. More importantly, make sure you're communicating about your course selection and your grades. Okay. Go Birds. Have a great week.